Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this guide we're going to go over city plans. As always, when I start these guides, I like to preface with two things. One is that most of this information is available in text form if you prefer to read the information or quickly look it up on our wiki at wiki.simsettlements2.com. And the second point is that most of the options I'm going to show you are customizable. So if you don't like a feature or prefer something to work a little bit differently, most likely you can change it or turn it off in our options section, which is available in our holotape, on the City Planner's desk, and in our MCM menu. So the most important element, if you are looking to build city plans, is to have yourself a City Planner's desk. This can be found in the Sim Settlements furniture menu. This does start unlocked regardless of whether you've done any of the quests, and this is so that you can quickly get into building settlements with Sim Settlements if you are not interested in doing a lot of manual building. The next thing you want to do is find a settler to assign to this desk. Alternatively, you can use the leader card system, which is not really available immediately unless you are starting some settlements with a lot of companions unlocked, or if you've got add-on packs that introduce more leader options. But you will all have immediately the option to just grab a generic settler and assign them right to the desk. Now, if you're wondering why I'm zipping around and flying in the air, that is because I have the mod Workshop Plus installed, which is another one that I maintain, and it gives you kind of superpowers while you're in workshop mode. So now it'll tell you that the settler was put in charge successfully, and the next thing that will happen is you'll get a little pop-up asking if you want to let them build. And what effectively this does is if you say yes, tear it all down, it's going to break down anything that's built in the settlement and then build up a predetermined design based on a city plan. When you use this menu, it's going to grab one at random from those that you have installed. Sim Settlements by default includes a simple design for each settlement, something we call the basics, and it's effectively a single level city plan that will give you a moderate amount of settlers in that settlement and a decent collection of plots. So it's something very basic that any system can handle. We wanted to make sure that we included by default something that even Xbox players can use. If you're looking for something more exotic, something a little bit more detailed with multiple upgrade levels on the city plan, you will want to hit up one of the community add-on packs, or we have one on the team called Rise of the Commonwealth, which has a very detailed design for each of the base game settlements. There is also a city plan contest pack that's available that has dozens and dozens of city plans from the community who competed in our monthly city plan contest. There's some very, very amazing designs in there as well. So you have a lot of options, but you would need to install additional if you want more than just the basic plans that are available. Once you select yes, tear it all down here, which I will do now, it's going to ask you to pay a cost, which is in the form of ASAM sensors. And then as long as you have those and pay it, it will randomly select one of the city plans that you have installed. Alternatively, you have another way you can start this. All right, so off camera, I've added myself some ASAM sensors for when I show you this method, we can actually build a city plan. So if you don't want a random city plan selected, if you've got multiple city plans installed and you have one in particular in mind you want to use, or you want to make sure that you end up with a leveled one rather than a basic one, you have another way you can start the city plan. So if you go to the little blueprint on the desk that's labeled Manage City and choose Activate, you will get this menu. And from here, you can choose Select City Plan. Now on some settlements, which include Sanctuary, Red Rocket, Castle, and a few others, if there are quests in the base game you have not yet completed that we know can be negatively impacted by some city plans, we will give you this warning, basically having you acknowledge the fact that that might be the case. For example, in Sanctuary, if you haven't completed Codsworth's quest where he runs around and clears out all the bugs, some city plans may block those buildings and make it so it's impossible for him to path, and then that quest can get stuck. So we give you this warning because you may want to go and complete any related vanilla quests. If you're curious which quests those are, I imagine that information is available on the wiki or our forums, but I've just told you about the one in Sanctuary. I can also tell you in Red Rocket, it is dog meat. If you haven't grabbed dog meat yet, that can be interrupted by some city plans, and in Castle it is old guns. So beyond that, the others I would have to go look it up. I actually am not sure off the top of my head of which ones are blocked and for what reason, but know that if you get this warning, just take heed. If you are intending on doing quests involve this settlement, you should do them first. So we're going to go ahead and say use the city plan. I understand the risks. And then in a moment, we'll get a list of the city plans in a cycling menu. So basically we can hit next and cycle through all of the ones we've got installed. Now I have Rise of the Commonwealth, or ROTC, installed. So that's going to show up in my menu. And then I have, of course, the basics from SS2. You can see it's prefixed with the brackets SS2, telling you that that's the add-on pack that it came from. It's actually coming from the base mod. So if you have something like the city plan contest pack or various add-ons with additional city plans here, those will also be available in this menu. Now, some other things that might come up here. First off, we have designer's description. If you click on this, you will get a little description about how it's meant to be used or what it's meant to do. The designer of the plan actually has control over this message, so they can vary in depth in how much information they're giving you and the type of content that they're offering you in the description. Some of them will do things like we did, which is show the various people involved and give it a brief explanation. Others will go in depth, telling you about their design and things you can expect from it. And so check out those designer's description if you're interested in additional information. Now, another thing that you don't see on my screen, but you might see on yours if you're using some of the city plans from add-on packs or from the contest pack, is you might see a thing about missing plugins. If you see that, that does not mean you can't use the city plan without those plugins. It's just kind of a warning that you may have either some small holes in your design or that any plots that were using building plans you don't have installed may end up with a random building plan installed instead. So it is not a warning that you can't run that city plan. It's just telling you that you don't have the same plugins that that mod author had who designed the city plan. So in some cases, you might want to go install those add-ons or those mods, but often you can get away without them. So for those of you who are playing with the contest pack in particular, one of the rules that we had while those settlement designers were working is they could only use SS2 items, vanilla items, and DLC items in their design so that you wouldn't have to worry about having large holes in your design if you were lacking some of the add-on packs that they had installed, and they weren't meant to use various other building mods, again, so that these would be usable by everybody who has SS2 installed without any problems. So any of those from that pack you can use safely. If you downloaded additional add-ons with city plans, check their descriptions. They will likely have explanations for what within the other mods they have are used in their city plan so that you know what you're getting into if you decide not to install those mods. But again, for the most part, you can ignore those warnings. They're just there in case you want to go figure out what add-ons or mods you should install to get the complete experience. So we'll go ahead and choose use city plan here, and now we will get our 20 ASAM sensor warning once again. Immersively, the idea is you're providing the ASAM sensors for the plots, and the actual scrap to build the place is coming from tearing down what's existing, because we're once again going to get the yes, tear it all down warning, and this time if we answer yes, it will begin the city plan. All right, so we're going to click yes, tear it all down. We'll get the verification Vault Boy telling us that it worked, and then we'll go into what we call cinematic mode. So cinematic mode was designed to not only give you a cool perspective to watch the city plan being erected, but also to prevent you from being tempted to do anything else in your settlement. So doing things like going in and out of workshop mode, changing settings in the holotape or on the desk could cause this to be problematic. So the city plan is doing a ton of scripting behind the scenes, so we don't want you to risk doing anything to break it. In addition, you shouldn't leave the area while a city plan is being built, particularly at the early stages while scrapping is going on. Now, if you have cinematic mode disabled, which we do recommend you disable it if you are on a low-end PC or playing on an older Xbox, because all of these camera angles can cause an overload on the game engine and it can fail to render things and then inevitably crash. So if you found that you were crashing during cinematic mode and disabled it, just know you should hang around the settlement until the city plan has finished constructing. Now, it's easy to tell when it's done because things build from bottom to top, so you'll start to see things kind of go up into the sky as they're building, and then you can roughly judge when it's done. It's okay to leave in the middle of the later phases of the build process, but the part you definitely need to stick around for and shouldn't be doing things is during the scrapping phase. So when a city plan is first built, what it is doing is scrapping all of the things you, the player, built, or anything that your other systems like workshop framework layouts, transfer settlements blueprints, or even a previous city plan had built. All those things are removed, hence the tear it all down. Next, it looks at the vanilla scrappable items and decides which ones need to go and which ones need to return. So for example, on that pad in the center of the screen, I had scrapped the old house there, but that is actually part of this design, so it will be restored, as you see there. And then finally, the actual design items will start to appear. Now, some of them may appear early. We can see that a few items appeared right at the beginning of the city plan. All of this stuff is threaded out. That is just a coding term that means that it's set up to do things simultaneously, and the game will clean those up and take care of things as quickly as it can. If you're on a higher end system, this can happen very quickly. On a lower end system, this can take several minutes. So we can see here that most of the city plan already constructed, and it's been probably less than 2 minutes. And the last thing it will do in the build process after the scrapping and laying down of all these foundations is it will put down the plots. Now, what the plots will do is attempt to apply the same building plan the original designer used. This is called designer's choice in our settings. So if you want to add some randomization, you can turn off designer's choice, and then random building plans you have installed that fit the type and shape of plot will be applied instead. But by default, we're going to use the same ones the designers used. Now, there is a circumstance where a plot will end up unbuildable, and that is if the designer had an add-on pack that had a combination of size and plot design that you do not. So for example, in the base mod and its expansions, we don't have any building plan support for 1x1 industrial. So if you have a city plan that uses 1x1 industrial because they had an add-on pack with that type of building plan in it, yours would just remain dormant until you install an add-on pack that supports that. Alternatively, you can change plots. So you can walk up to a plots ASAM sensor and pick a new building plan for it, or even go to the customized plot section and change it to a different plot class for one that you know you do have building plans available for. So if you find that one is not building, it may be that it's a type that there are no building plans installed on your game for currently. So that is the one spot where a city plan can create kind of an empty space on your design and your settlement. If you see any items like the red item floating, those will generally disappear on their own. Those are specialty marker items that we have in the designer's toolkit for building out city plans, and they add functionality. For example, that red floating icon in here is what the camera uses to pivot around, and it will either disappear during this sequence or the next time you enter and exit workshop mode. Those are all controlled by that. And again, they're designed to give power to settlement designers to change some of the behavior, whether in city plans, or there are some things like what we call the blue men, which are just animation markers that the designer can place down. And like I said, by default, those should disappear as soon as you enter and exit workshop mode, or they'll just happen naturally once the scripts all manage to catch up and clean up all of this data. So that one that just reappeared there, that is likely just due to the popping in and out of items as we're kind of flying around in the air here. So once all of this is done, you will be pulled out of cinematic mode and placed right back where you were, which I imagine will happen any moment now because the system I'm running on is fairly quick, so should be able to handle the city plan pretty easily. And the ROTC city plans all use building plans that are available in the base mod, so if you're using the Rise of the Commonwealth, you will not need any add-on packs installed. The same is true for the basics plans. But any of those that came from the City Plan Contest Mega Pack or from add-ons that you downloaded with additional city plans, those are likely going to use buildings from other add-on packs, so you might want to install more add-on packs in order to get closer to the designer's vision. Some designers like to attach things to the actual building models. In fact, you'll find that is the case sometimes even with things like Rise of the Commonwealth or the basics plans. So if you do find a little marker floating in the air, or rather a connection point for power floating in the air, that may be that they're expecting a particular building to be there. And so that's one of the reasons to stick with designer's choice in the options. But again, you do not have to. And another thing to note about city plans is that after they finish building, if you decide to add things, the city plan will not scrap those again. So anything that you build after the city plan's initial build phase is considered sacred. The city plan will not touch it. The settlers are not going to scrap it on you. So you can make additions and adjustments to the city plan. Now, anything that the city plan builds is subject to be edited if the city plan upgrades. So occasionally plots will change their design or may upgrade. They may actually be removed. Items that are placed by the city plan can be changed when they are upgraded. So things that are already there from the city plan, you will likely want to leave, with the exception of plots. You may want to change them to a different building plan or a different type. But any of the other items, you should assume that they may or may not be there at future levels. So you'll want to keep your edits generally to areas that aren't built by the city plan. It tends to be that most city plans have sections. For example, in our design of Sanctuary and ROTC here, you can see that all of the area over by the bridge and on the top area of our screen up there is all basically untouched, and those areas are free for you, the player, to make your own flourishes or add additional services or plot types that you need to make the city plan function better. So if you find that things are taking too long and you want to get back to playing, once you're at this build phase, you can actually force yourself out of cinematic mode, and you're usually safe to continue. Like I said, after the scrapping phase, once the major building starts, you actually are safe to leave the settlement and go on about the gameplay. So right now, to do that, what you'll do is open your Pip-Boy and then close it, and then that will trigger an end to cinematic mode. So now it's going to teleport me back to where I started, and I will be free to play the rest of the game. And all of the code, anything that's still running regarding the city plan, will continue to run in the background. Now, as many experienced SS2 players will tell you, that you can easily create script backup situations where things kind of get stuck. If you go and do things that are not settlement related during this time after a city plan, all those scripts will have plenty of time to clean themselves up. So this is a good time to go out and do some questing, make sure that that city plan is fully built. Like I said, in order to create these settlements on the fly, including all the mechanics that drive them, it can be a little bit slow. Now, one thing I am going to do here is I'm going to pop into workshop mode and write out again, so I can show you how these types of things will disappear here after we exit. So we'll go ahead and exit out, and you can see now those markers will disappear in the same way that these floating icons, the hollow HUD icons that we have, will appear and disappear as you go in and out of workshop mode. Some items built by city planners will do that same sort of thing. Now, again, because we are in a very heavily scripted situation right here, just after a city plan, there can be some delays. You can see that the icons are taking quite a while to disappear. And again, that's normal, and another reason to go do something else while you're waiting for this to finish up its processing. So after the city plan has finished building, it basically will act as a settlement that you're no longer in charge of unless you've changed the involvement setting. So I'm going to show you guys a special setting, and we'll talk about how it works. I went over this in the City Planner's Desk video, but it's worth recovering because it really applies to city plans here. So once you find your city planner's desk, which every city plan will have, and if you can't find it, you can always build yourself another one. We also have a tracking tool to find it, but once you find it, you'll see that there's a City Manager 2078 software terminal on it. And if we activate this, I'm going to show you two things here. One is the local settings. So if we go to gameplay and go down to local settings, there are a series of settings that you can change at the current settlement only, and some of these settings get set for you when you use a city plan. Now, which ones get set to which options is based on your involvement setting, and that can be found under city building. So if we go down to involvement here, you can see my current involvement is set to match global, which means that all of the city plans local settings will just continue to match whatever is used across all the rest of my options. So basically the local settings are not used. But if you choose one of these low, moderate, or none, you will see that a variety of things will change. So if you look at the top there in the description, it says none equals city plan settlements will be fully automated. Low, city plan settlements require junk to build and upgrade. Moderate, city plan settlements require junk to build and upgrade and must have their needs met: food, water, and defense. So basically, if you set this setting before you build a city plan, set your involvement setting, it will change some of those local settings en masse for you. Or again, you can come into this terminal and change those local settings yourself. So if you want to do something like make it so that once the city plan is built, the city plan will eventually upgrade and you don't ever have to worry about its needs, you can do that if you want it to feel very automated. Now note that settlers will not always make the best decisions about which plot types to build, and the numbers can often require you to come in and augment things, whether by building things manually or by changing plot types manually. So note that if you are on the match global setting, it's basically going to follow the same rules as the rest of your settlement, and you may need to get involved. So if you're looking for city plans to be fully autonomous, where you don't have to worry about their numbers, and even if they're failing, you can just ignore them, you'll want to put the involvement setting to none before you build the city plan. All right, now we're going to talk about the HUD. So on the left-hand side of my screen, you'll see the status meters, and just above that, you'll see some information that maybe you didn't see before building a city plan. So this information here is to help you do what's needed to be done to get the city plan to upgrade. So first up, we have the population. You see now it says 9 out of 16. That means we have 9 people now, but the city plan can support up to 16 people in this level of the city plan. Once that is filled up, that satisfies one of the upgrade requirements. Now you actually don't need to get it all the way. You only need to get it to about 80% full, but that gives you a target to work on, something you, the player, can impact. You can send settlers from other settlements, recruit new settlers through our various systems, and send them here to get that number up to 16. Next up, we have the city plan icon and the current level. So we consider the foundation, when you first build a city plan, we consider that level 0, and then you're working towards level 1, 2, and 3. Next up, we have the current blocker, which in this case is time, and that icon will change after that's satisfied. So the first blocker is always time. It takes 10 days before you're eligible for level 1, then 20 more days to be eligible for level 2, and 30 days after that for level 3, for a total of 60 days minimum to get all the way up to level 3 of the city plan. But like I said, that's just the first blocker. So after the time has passed, the next thing that might show up there is a happiness requirement. In order to go to level 1, you need to have 70 happiness, level 2, you'll need 80, and level 3, 90. Now, those can be bypassed if you've got the right involvement or local settings. If you avoid citizen needs, then the happiness requirement is actually removed. The other setting that can be removed, and that's the final blocker, is junk. So in order to upgrade, your settlers will need to accumulate a large amount of junk in order to pay for an upgrade. And this is why you'll find most city plans are designed with some amount of industrial, as well as a large amount of junk storage. You can see in this design from ROTC, we've got a bunch of the containers over here so that our max junk storage is 6,000. You'll find that most of the ROTC and basics plans have quite a lot of junk storage for this purpose. So once the appropriate amount of junk is gathered, the population is up, the happiness is reached, and the time has passed, the city plan is eligible for upgrade. Now this will often happen automatically in the background. You won't have to do anything, but some people do like to turn off automatic city upgrades so that way they can come here and witness it. They can go back into the cinematic mode and watch all the upgrades occur. Also because they may decide that adding any more stuff to a settlement to upgrade it would actually cause their game to be unstable, just especially on Xbox or lower end systems. You might want to disable automatic city upgrades. Otherwise they will happen while you're away. You don't actually have to come here to see them happen, but if you're trying to push them forward, those requirements I just described are how you would do it. Now the actual costs for upgrade are determined dynamically, and they have to do with the complexity of the design. So if the settlement designer or the city plan designer built a lot of items, then the upgrades will cost more junk. If they built more complex items, those that provide benefits, in particular, we look for things like plots, things that provide power, defense, water, and food. Those things will also have an impact on the overall cost. So for players playing in component complexity, you'll find that more complex city plans with more resource providers will create a cost that involves a greater number of different components, whereas a simple design would have mostly just building materials or cheap materials. And so as the city plans get more complex, so too do their costs to upgrade. All right, so there's a few other elements I want to discuss regarding city plans before we end this video. One is that power lines can be run from a city plan, but they won't always be. So first off, you need to have F4SE in order for power lines to run. Now, if you're on Xbox, that's impossible, so you'll find that instead, all of the items built by a city plan do not require power instead. But if you're playing on PC, you have F4SE, you might find that city plans run their own power lines. Now, if you come to a city plan and you find that not a lot of power lines have run, you have a few different options here. One is if you go to the Manage City option once again, you can choose the Run City Plan Power Lines, and this will attempt to rerun the power line data that's stored in the city plan to see if it's able to do so. The way that power line data is recorded is we kind of record the order that items were placed and which items were meant to be connected to which, and we've got to rebuild that. And sometimes due to whether you're away, because power lines can't be run during construction if you're not in the settlement, or there was just a lot of script lag that caused items to get placed out of order, sometimes the power lines cannot be run. It also can be the case that the city plan designer did not actually wire everything at the current level of the city plan. So it may be that some of the wires just aren't available there. And if you find that that's the case after choosing powering up city plan, if you find there are still a lot of things that are unwired, you do have another option. And that is if you go to the workbench, you'll find that Workshop Framework actually has the ability to run power lines as well. So if we go here and go to manage, and again, this requires that you have F4OC. If we go to Power Tools, you can choose this Auto Wire Settlement option, and it will actually look at all of the items in a settlement and determine an optimal way to wire all of them so that all of them have wires run. So you have a couple of options there to force run wires. So right now our Power Up City Plan is still running. We got that little progress meter, and it's going to do the best it can. I believe with ROTC, we do not have all of the levels fully wired. Instead, we opted to just wire up level 3, and then in between there we anticipate that you'll be using what's called faux power. So by default, most of our items are going to be automatically powered for you to make it easier so that you don't have to worry about that sort of thing. You don't have to worry about everything being powered. But if you like the wires, I personally love the wires, you have the option of using, again, the Workshop Framework Auto Wire Settlement option, or you can just manually go in and run wires everywhere. So you have a couple of different options there for how you get wires run. All right, now let's go back into this Manage City menu. I want to show you guys a few other options here that might be useful to you. First up, we have View City Details. From here, you can see some of the information about it. You can see the current level, what settlement you're in, which plan you have applied, who the designers are, and the current population. This is just similar to looking at the ASAM sensor, and it's just meant for you to have a quick way to look at what is currently set up. Another thing you have the ability to do is replace the city plan. This will let you select a new city plan. It will then trigger the teardown process to remove everything and place down a new city plan. Remove city plan is a little bit more of an advanced option. Some players may want this if they plan on customizing after a certain level. So let's say, for example, that we have this level 0 for the city plan and we don't want it to continue to upgrade. We want it to stay here and we want to manipulate things manually. If you choose remove city plan, it doesn't actually scrap everything automatically. Instead, you have the option to do so. So you can choose here to just clear the record, which means that no upgrades will happen, or you can choose, yeah, go ahead and scrap everything too. So you have an option there to prevent upgrades permanently and basically make it so that all these items are yours to tinker with by choosing the clear the record. Then we've got the replace city leader. This has to do with the leader system. This you can basically swap out who is in charge. The replace city leader here will bring up the leader card system. We'll talk more about leaders in their own video. Dismiss city leader, again, you can make it so that you don't have a leader. And by default, the rules of Sim Settlements 2 are that without a leader, a settlement will not upgrade. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, we've got refresh city plan. Now, some people will report that this ends up getting things stuck. So just be aware, this is a very, very script intensive process. Effectively, what it's going to do is tear everything down and rebuild it back up as if the city plan was just built. This can be useful if you ran into a problem where when you originally ran the city plan, there was too much script lag going on and things just seem to have stalled out, and you have maybe floating items or things that didn't build correctly. You might want to try a refresh. It's not always useful, and for some players it just makes things worse. It's kind of an emergency button, and that is why it's buried down at the bottom of the menu. Most of you guys will never need to use it though, so it's not something that you need to worry about, but just wanted to point it out and give that warning that some players do find that if their game is already backed up script-wise, that's not going to help anything. All right, some other points worth talking about. Plots will be upgraded during city plan upgrades, and plots can bypass locks. So throughout the game of SS2, when you are playing the story, you'll know that you unlock various things. You unlock different plot types, you unlock different building classes. City plans by default are allowed to bypass those unlocks. So they can place plots that you haven't gotten access to yet. They can use building plans that you haven't unlocked yet. And that again is to encourage the city plan system to recreate the designer's vision exactly. So we don't introduce the city plans in our story until after you've already unlocked anything to kind of avoid most of this problem. Of course, the building classes are an exception, but we did find that most people in all of our years working on this preferred to have city plans that look pretty. and match the designer's vision than they did to care about immersion or bypassing things. If you decide to build a city plan and it does bypass things, you don't suddenly get to build those building plans yourself in advance. So you, just because you see a cool building plan you haven't unlocked yet in a city plan doesn't mean you can go start building it in other settlements. So there's kind of a balance there, in a sense, is that you lose the control for the advantage of getting access to those things early. So if you do see some things build in a city plan that you don't have unlocked yet, that is normal. If you prefer not to have that happen, you do have an option in the holotape to prevent that. All right, hopefully that gave you guys a lot of useful information, both on the technical level and just on the usability level about city plans. I am going to leave you guys with one final warning, and that is about building too many city plans in a small cluster. So those of you who are familiar with the community and hang out on our forums and things are probably very familiar with the term the Triangle of Death. This is what we call the trifecta of settlements: Sanctuary, Red Rocket, and Abernathy. There are areas, especially around Red Rocket, where all three settlements are loaded simultaneously. Now, if you hang out in such an area and you have all three settlements built up with high-level city plans, you can make a very unstable game because it's just too many items to load into memory at once. So we recommend only building one or two of those. If you're on Xbox, I would pick one of them and build that up heavily, and the other two, just leave them alone. And this doesn't just apply to city plans, but city plans make it worse because city plans tend to have way more items than you, the player, might build on your own. So you'll want to kind of use city plans sparingly, particularly on low end, but in clusters where multiple settlements exist in close proximity, pick one in that little region, and that should be the only one that you apply a high-level city plan to, and again, unless you're on a very high-end PC. All right, guys, take care, and enjoy the mods.